6 years before the flood. And can you get me a glass out of there? A cup? Go ahead.
And one of 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races.
Ham became the father of the dark races, read.
Not the Negroes.
Not the Negroes. So Ham is not the father of the Israelites or the Negroes here in America. Even Zondervan know that. But who?
But the Egyptians.
The Egyptians, which is Matazarium or Mizraim in the Bible, Africans. They are not us, read.
Ethiopians.
Ethiopians, which are Africans, which are not us, read.
Libyans.
Libyans, which are North Africans, read.
And Canaanites.
Canaanites, which are South Africans. These are 4 separate families that have nothing to do with the children of Israel. All 4 of these families came from Ham. So how can one today pick one of those 4 sons and claim that all history and civilization came out of one of Ham's sons, when Ham came from someone? That's common sense. If Ham came from someone, which is Noah, how can you say all life came out of Egypt? And if you have history of the boats, you'll know all history came off of the boats. All people came off of the boats. So there was no Egypt until the water settled, and Ham took his son down into that region, and the Egyptians stayed there. So Ham had to migrate into the place you called Africa in order for the Egyptians to get any history. That's common sense. All right, now, was the Israelites in Egypt? Yes, we were. Our people were in Egypt. We were the great kings in Egypt. All right? During the Hyksos period, King Tut, Enhotep. Joseph's name was Imhotep. That was his name. Okay? We're going to get some history out of the Bible. I need you to go to Genesis, the 41st chapter and the 22nd verse. To show beyond any shadow of a doubt the history of how the Israelites got into the land of Egypt. Okay? How can is another thing. There's no way we can say that the Bible is a white man's book if the Bible shows the children of Israel going into Egypt, and we know that the Egyptians were all black people. So how can this be a white man's book when it's showing Moses as a prince in Egypt? It's showing Joseph being king over all Egypt under Ramesses first. And these were all black people. So how can they make these statements that the Bible is a white man's book? Now, let's go to Genesis 7, Genesis 41 and 22. Right? You can follow us along here. Genesis 41, let's start at the 22nd verse. Read. Huh? Start at 32?
Yeah.
Genesis 41 and 32. Start there.
Genesis 41 and 32. And for that dream was
You got to
double
read a
unto
little
Pharaoh.
louder because you got the fan there.
Genesis 41 and 32. And for that dream was double unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the thing is established by the Most High, and the Most High will shortly bring it to pass.
So Joseph had a dream that there will be 7 years of famine and 7 years of plenteous. Okay? And because of that dream, the Pharaoh was able to prepare his store for 7 years of famine. First there was 7 years of plenteous, and the Most High had Egypt so fertile that within that 7 years they was able to store for a 7-year famine. The Pharaoh would not have known this if it wasn't for Joseph interpreting his dream to tell him what was going on. He's seen corn and all type of plentiness in his dream, and then he's seen a dearth over the land where there was nothing, and he had no one to break it down. But Joseph, an Israelite, which is the father of the Puerto Ricans, that's who they are, was able to interpret the dream for the Pharaoh. And because of that, the people were able to survive. The brothers and sisters were able to survive in Egypt based on that dream. So the Most High rewarded Joseph in Egypt. The king rewarded Joseph in Egypt. And we're going to show that. Read.
Verse 33. Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt.
And set him what?
And set him over the land of Egypt.
So you're going to find out that the pharaohs of Egypt set Israelites over the land of Egypt. This is in the Bible. Read.
Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years.
Go ahead.
And let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. And that food shall be for store to the land against 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine.
See that? So it was a decree that they would set up some people over Egypt to save Egypt from the famine that was coming. Read the 37th verse.
Verse 37. And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, Can we find such as one as this, a man in whom the Spirit of the Most High is? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph.
He said unto who?
And Pharaoh said unto Joseph.
Joseph, the son of Israel. Read.
For as much as the Most High have showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art.
He said, you are the wisest man in Egypt right now, Joseph. Now check that out. Read.
Verse 40. Thou shalt be over my house.
Thou shalt be what?
Thou shalt be over my house.
So the king of Egypt is putting Joseph, an Israelite, over all of Egypt. Read.
And according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou.
He said, only in the throne, Joseph, will I be greater than you. That means when people see you, they're going to see a king. When you say a man live, a man live. When you say a man dies, a man dies. Your word will rule Egypt. Read.
Verse 41. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, See, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt.
I did what?
I have set thee over all the land of Egypt.
And I don't understand why brothers won't even accept this. It was like, we wasn't no shepherds. What good is a shepherd? The Most High always used the low of the earth to rule, so that he can show his power through us. You're saying that you can't be a shepherd or a slave in Egypt, but what are you here in America? You are a slave. If you were living back in Egypt, you'll be in the same predicament under another people. Okay, back then we were shepherds. Read on. What verse you left off?
Verse 42.
Go ahead.
And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it upon Joseph's hand.
Now you have to understand the significance of that ring. See, people don't understand when it comes to rulership and dominion. A ring is distinguished only for the king, so he can stamp all legislature. So if there's rules or laws that need to be passed, it would have to have the king's signet on it for it to be approved from kingdom to kingdom. It's only on the king's signet, and it's on the one ring. So no laws were decreed or passed unless it went through Joseph. They would melt the wax on the laws and stick your ring in the wax for the king's signet, or it wouldn't be law. So that's how big Joseph was. Joseph had the king's ring that brought forth all legislation in the land of Egypt. Read.
Verse 42. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck.
So you know what Pharaoh did? Pharaoh dressed Joseph up like a what? Like an Egyptian. So when you see Joseph's tombs and his relics of Imhotep, you would think it was an Egyptian, but the Pharaoh dressed him up as an Egyptian. Kind of like we see right here. The Hebrew pharaohs of Egypt. And that's the reason when his brothers came to see him, they couldn't recognize him. Because he was dressed, he looked exactly like an Egyptian.
That's also telling you something too.
What's that?
If his brothers couldn't recognize him, that's his brother. That means if he was mistaken as an Egyptian, then his whole brothers must look like him.
Exactly. And if he was mistaken as an Egyptian, that means he must have been black just like the other Egyptians. Absolutely. But check this out. You would know your little brother. They didn't recognize him because he was dressed up like a king. He had the eye stuff going, everything. He looked just like an Egyptian king. They didn't even recognize him because he was dressed up as the king of Egypt. Who's that? Imhotep. Okay? And even in Egypt history, Imhotep came in at a point and was totally separate from the Egyptians. But that's another point. I don't want to get off the beaten path. Let's get the next scripture here. Where's that sheet at here? Let's get let's read on down to 57. Finish reading.
Not valid.
Verse 43.
Go ahead.
And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had.
Go ahead.
And they cried before him, bow the knee, and he made him rule over all the land of Egypt.
They made him what?
Bow the knee, and he made him rule over all the land of Egypt.
So Joseph was a ruler over all the land of Egypt. That's crystal clear. Read on.
And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name.
Read that, hold up, read that last part again so we can see how big Joseph was. Read that part again.
Verse 44. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt.
A man cannot do nothing unless it comes through Joseph, which was an Israelite. All right, read on.
And verse 45. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath Paaneah.
Go ahead.
And he gave him to wife Asenath, the daughter of
Potiphar,
priest of On.
Now these are the Hebrew names when you break it down. These are Hebrew names. All right, read.
And
Now when you translate them, they translate into Egypt names, but we're reading this directly translated from the Hebrew to English, so you can understand. All right, read.
And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt.
He was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Read.
And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh, and went throughout all the land of Egypt. And in 7 plenteous years the earth brought forth by handfuls. And he gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities, the food of the field, which was round about every city, laid he up in the same. And Joseph gathered corn, as the sand of the sea, very, very much, until he left numbering, for it was without number. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons after the years of famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bare unto him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh.
Manasseh is your modern day Cubans. Okay, read.
For the Most High, said he, hath made me forgotten all my toil, and all my father's house.
Read a little faster. Go ahead.
And the name of the second called he Ephraim, for the Most High hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction.
And those are the so-called Puerto Ricans. Those 2 tribes came out of Joseph that were originally in Egypt. And believe it or not, there's a lot of Ephraimites and Manassites still in Egypt till this day. They look just like Puerto Ricans but speak Egyptian. Read.
Verse 53. And the 7 years of plenteous that was in the land of Egypt were ended, and the 7 years of dearth began to come, according as Joseph had said. And the dearth was in all lands, but in the land of Egypt there was bread. And when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, Go unto Joseph. What he said to you, do.
So all the Egyptians were at the begging